Welcome. I'm so excited to have all of you here with us. We've just had a phenomenal turnout of parents, students, families who are all interested in the topic of how do we help our young adults launch into the real world, whether it's into that internship or that first job, and really go from stuck to hired. So let me kind of step you through what we're going to cover tonight. So before we even get started, I want to share, and let me make my picture a little smaller. I take all that information that everyone was so kind enough to share in the original registration about what is your biggest challenge, what is on your mind and is kind of causing you the most stress. And I always find it really fascinating that if you take a look, and we have right now, this was based on like 20 minutes ago. So we had at that point 210 people who registered, 169 parents, 41 students and grads. But the majority of the people who are here are really concerned about networking and how do you find those right people. And that is a big focus of what we talk about because that is really the key to getting hired. And I'll talk a lot about that this evening. Obviously, the next piece is like, how do you even get that interview? I know we have a huge problem with a lot of young adults getting ghosted. People are not getting back to you. Obviously, then how to stand out, finding a career path. Tools come at the bottom. And it's interesting, impact of AI kind of had the least worry, which is, I think it's good. I think there's a balance, and we'll talk about AI of where that comes into play, especially with young adults. But I just thought you'd find it interesting to see like what everyone's thinking and what's everyone's on their mind. I will absolutely be addressing all of these key topics tonight, but thank you for giving me the feedback. So it really helps me to understand of what's on your mind and what keeps you up at night, because I know I'm not the only one who worries about these things. So let's talk about this. Get myself a little bit larger on the screen. So wasn't this supposed to be easy? We send our kids to college, and I say we because I have a son who just graduated college as well. And we send them to school, and we expect that when they come out, that they will have a job and be gainfully employed and financially independent. And for different reasons, it's so much harder than any of us predicted. Even if you're a student watching, it just didn't go the way we all thought. And I think there's this disconnect going on in a couple of areas to highlight. We have this situation where a lot of young adults and grads are struggling. They are overwhelmed by the process. They thought it would be a lot easier, or they went to the right school. Parents like myself, we thought the university would handle this, right? Didn't they promise us on the campus tour that that they would have a job when they graduated? And we have this other piece from employers of they need talent, but they also have a decision now of do they use AI instead? So we have this challenge, we have this problem. So let's kind of talk about what I'm going to cover tonight and how to help you in addressing this problem. I'm going to highlight what are the perspectives from a parent, a student, and what an employer is actually expecting right now. I'm going to definitely spend a little bit of time on what are the outlook? What's the trends? What is happening with the class of 2026? Or it doesn't matter whether you graduated a few years ago or you're going to be graduating and you're still looking for that internship. What's happening with hiring right now? The other piece, and I only am new to doing this, I did this in my last webinar and it was really well received. So this is only the second time doing this, where I'm going to show you actual case studies of clients that came to us and what their profile was, what they were doing, and then the transformation of after working with us and really employing some of the techniques and approaches, how they were actually able to land the job or the internship that they really wanted that lined up to their skills. And I also know I have lots of families who say, gosh, I wish I knew. I wish I knew what the right thing was to do from the beginning, or I wish I knew what advice to give. And I'm going to spend some time also on what employers actually really expect. I have three specific employers that I've had the chance to speak with who do campus recruiting and will give you exactly what they are expecting, as well as maybe a few mistakes as parents that we make. And I'll tell you, I make them too, and things that you can do instead. And likewise, if you're a student, some of the mistakes you might be making and what you can do to be successful as well. And I will leave plenty of time in between. I'm not going to talk the whole time. I'll kind of take a break in the middle. I'll leave time for Q&A, and then I will come back at the end. But for those of you I haven't had the chance and pleasure of meeting, my name is Beth Hendler-Grun. I am the CEO and founder of Next Great Step, and our sole focus is to help college students and recent grads land the internship or the first job after college. I'm also the mom of a class of 2026 grad, so I get it. I'm living this with you. My older son finished grad school last year, so I'm right here with you. I'm also the Amazon #1 best-selling author of the book, The Next Great Step, The Parent's Guide to Launching Your New Grad into a Career. And we have helped over 1,000 students over the last 11 years land the job that they desire. And it's such an honor to work with families and help young adults on their path. So that's just a little bit about me. And I also just want to share quickly, I've had the real honor as a thought leader in this space. I was featured in CNBC magazine 2 weeks in a row. So this week and last week, talking about one was about the 10 and 10 strategy, and the other one was about the best phrase to use to get someone to respond. And I will share those with you this evening. We also had a feature in Bloomberg in the last month or so, the Journal, Fortune. So I feel really fortunate to be able to be a part of helping young adults do this. We are considered a thought leader in this space. So let's get started. Let's talk about this for a minute. And I'll talk about as a parent, because I'm one with you too. And just because I do this for a living doesn't mean I always get it right. But as parents, we send our kids to school and we really thought more things would be taken care of when they went, like our kids going to career services or using campus resources to help them be successful in landing that job. But did you know that only 4 in 10 kids actually go to career services? We also thought that our kids would learn life skills, how to network, meet their professors, forge relationships that would help build their connections to help them find those opportunities as they progress. But it doesn't always happen the way we think. The other thing that's hard as being a parent is some of us haven't looked for a job in 20 plus years. So we're not sure if the advice that we're offering is valid or is it out of touch. And I mentioned this earlier, but something that parents say to me a lot is like, I wish I knew what kind of advice to give to my kid early on, or I wish I knew how to help them. And I just want to assure all of you that it's not too late. It's never too late. And I will share with that more about that this evening. And then we have to think about AI. It's absolutely here. It's not going anywhere. And how does that impact our kids and their ability to get opportunities as they move forward? And then let's talk about the students, right? As a student, you come into school so excited. You feel like you did it. You got into the college that you wanted, with the major that you wanted, with a lot of enthusiasm, and you progress into school and you start hearing about the importance of internships. And you're like, let me try this for myself. Let me see if I can apply to some jobs and make it happen. And very often students will start applying, they'll use the device in their hand, they'll go to Handshake or Indeed or Glassdoor, any of them, and try to apply for internships. And sometimes it works, a lot of times it doesn't. So then they start to rethink, maybe I just need to stuff my resume with the right keywords. Maybe that's what I need to do, or maybe I need to fix my LinkedIn profile. So they'll tweak their resume or LinkedIn and try to trick the tracking system, the ATS system, and that doesn't always work either. And then suddenly students start to become questioning, like, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Very often you might fall for a job that's a scam, it's not real. And start to question, what do I do? And is AI going to take my job? How do I even use AI? And there becomes this pattern of being stuck and afraid and overwhelmed. And then we have employers. Employers have a decision to make. They have scaled back. 2 years ago, there were 2 jobs available to every job seeker. Now there's 2 job seekers for every job that's open. And there also wants to see really the skill set from students and grads. What are the skills that you can demonstrate to help their business? Even more important at times than GPA. The other thing that happens with employers is there's something called quiet hiring. Quiet hiring is when the job posting never hits the job board. You never see it because what they do is when they have an opening, they don't want to deal with hundreds or thousands of applications. They want to go to their network of people that they know and trust and say, "Do you know anyone that would be great for this job?" So there's hundreds, potentially thousands of jobs that never get posted. And unless you become part of that network and that trusted referral, it's really hard to get those opportunities. And yes, they do want to see real world experience, whether it's through an internship or classwork or club or how you really engage in learning skills. And they do want to see your practice with AI beyond using it to cheat on your homework. So we have this kind of disconnect between these three parties. And how do we solve for that? So let's talk about it. And let's talk about first what's happening in the market from a trend perspective and why this feels challenging. So, right now, 2 million students graduate college every year. And as I said, there's two candidates pursuing every job. The challenge is that the unemployment for grads is higher than the national average. And we talk about this desire for internships, but did you know that 50% of, 8 million students got internships they wanted, but that means there's not enough supply to meet the demand. So we don't have even though employers say I want internships, but there's not enough going around. The other issue we have is that 4 in 10 grads are underemployed, which means they're doing jobs that you didn't need a college degree for. We know, and we see it over and over again, that grads are twice as more likely to get a post grad job with job experience. But then you go back to point number four and say, well, if I couldn't get an internship, how do I keep getting stuck in this cycle of not getting a job? And if you talk to grads, about 47% think AI has impacted their hiring, but only 23% are saying they're getting that training. So our universities, our colleges are not moving as fast as the technology is and being able to train our kids in this area. There was also a study that came out from Stanford. They interviewed, I think, 4 million job seekers. And it turns out, HireVue, which is that one-way interview, sometimes it's used as a screening process. They determine that when you do a HireVue interview one way, and if you don't have a great experience or you don't do well, that I'll say poor score will follow you for a year because over 60% of the Fortune 500 companies use HireVue or one-way interviews, and they're seeing that poor score. So we have these things sometimes stacked against you that you don't even realize are going on. And the last piece is that it takes time to land a job. I have students who say to me, I don't understand. I've tried for 6 weeks or 3 months. But according to the Bureau on Labor of Statistics, it takes 6 months to land a job. So we still have this disconnect that, again, a lot of grads and educators think they're ready, but not as many hiring managers agree. So what do we do about it? Let's talk about that because I think there are opportunities, and I want to make sure that this is not just a worrying about things. We absolutely, there are opportunities right now in IT, in healthcare, and we think about AI. I mean, cybersecurity, cloud, energy. Think about the amount of water and wind power that is needed to cool these data infrastructures. There's huge amount of demand in those areas. And of course, the trades and analytics. So there are increases in some key areas. We're also seeing key increases in AI jobs. I mean, that makes sense with strong benefits and strong pay. When you have that knowledge, and I'll talk about whether you can match that knowledge with your people skills, it can take you very far right now. But I want to dismiss a kind of a myth that a lot of students believe that they're not getting a job because they think it's being taken by AI. But the truth is that AI might only be replacing about 10% of entry level postings. It's not really, it hasn't permeated that far yet. So I think there actually is more opportunity than we all think. Sometimes you got to block out the noise of what's happening. NACE is the National Association for Colleges Employers. They initially projected employment for the class of 2026 to be flat. They now see it at about 5% increase, so that's positive as well. And if we talk to employed grads, they say they know, and this is what we'll talk about, 87% saying that networking was key. Networking can be taught. That is a skill that can be learned. And I think there's a real opportunity for our young adults to be able to have that. Again, more and more employers are using skill-based hiring over GPA. I will talk more about that when I give you feedback about what the hiring managers that I spoke with, campus recruiters, are actually looking for. But they do want what I call the luxury skills. The luxury skills are the things that you can't take away from, you can't use with AI. Adaptability, ability to communicate, work as a team, problem solve, leadership. And I think over and over, your ability to be human is going to be really valuable as AI spreads. I don't think it's going to, there's still people. We all exist. So until it's just a bunch of robots, but obviously you're all here to talk to me and hear me live and not some AI spit it out. So I think there's a real value in that. All right. So I want to share with you the approach of a few students that we worked with of what happened before and after. And I want to just give you a little framework of how we work so you understand it. So we employ this very simple, structured, step-by-step approach. And it really entails these kind of components. The first thing when we work with the students is helping them to define success. And what does that mean to them? So it doesn't matter. We kind of unhook them from forget for a minute what you studied and where you went to school. What is it that you'd ultimately want to be doing? Is there a vision that you see for yourself in terms of working with a lot of people, not too many people, a large company, small company? What would you do every day? So we really try to kind of peel that back and say, if this is what you want to get to, then what are some small steps and goals that can help you get there? But the foundation for our approach is really helping them to build a strategy. And the strategy really answers two questions of understanding number one, what core skills do I have that I can bring to an employer? And two, who am I going to bring them to in a really focused and clear way? And you'll see that more in the examples. And then how do you differentiate yourself? What makes you look different from the 100 other people that are coming that you're competing against? And a lot of it has to do with how you can add value and solve a problem for that organization while demonstrating your skills. And ultimately, execution. Every time you meet with someone or have an interview, your resume, your LinkedIn, your interviews, you have this very consistent brand and messaging about how you present yourself. So let me share my first example. Let me introduce you to Poe. Poe came to us in fall of 2025. His dad came to us first. He had done well. Obviously, you could see he went to Yale studying math and philosophy. He had internships between sophomore and junior year and junior and senior year. So, like on paper, you're thinking, why would this student need help? Because it seems like you're at a premier school. But he was struggling. He worked for an apparel retailer doing data analytics and branding for them, but they didn't have the ability to offer a return offer. They didn't have enough funding. And so he came into his senior year thinking he'd have a job, and he did not. So he just started applying to anything he could, any kind of job and all kinds of areas. Even though, like I said, he had the internships, no return offer, he tried networking, but it really didn't make the inroads that he was hoping for. And as you would see too, he also had this feeling of like, I don't understand with my pedigree and my connections why this is not enough. He was struggling with that. And he was kind of all over the place. He was considering startups or finance, marketing, data. As you can see, these are different areas. These are not all exactly related to each other. So wasn't sure how to target that in. And like a lot of students, especially when parents call first, and I understand this, there is a little skepticism of career coaching. Like, do I actually need this? And what is this going to do for me? But here's how we help Poe. So we engage with him in our program, and we really honed in on a couple key areas. So I mentioned earlier this whole idea of a strategy. And for him, helping to identify what are his top three core skills. What is he the most competent? What does he enjoy doing? And that he'd want to utilize in a role going forward. And for him, he really thought about his internships, his involvement on campus. He was played sports. And he really felt that he not only had these skills of leadership, data and analytics, and communication, but he was able to back it up with a really good example and story for each one. So that becomes the key piece of how you explain your skills and the story, because you have to assume they might not read your resume. They may not really look at it. Like, how can you articulate your value really clearly in a minute or two about what you're capable of doing? But the other key piece that we honed in on with him was the networking. And I teach this approach called the 3 A's. And it's really about thinking ahead, what outcome do I want to have happen? So if I meet with someone, what ultimate action would I like that person to take after the meeting? Not like, I hope they like me. That's kind of passive, right? Maybe that person will introduce me to other people on their team, or maybe they will refer me to another colleague at another company, or they'll agree to mentor me, or I can shadow, but something that's actionable that you can do with them. But in order for a person to do that, what kind of attitude do they need to have about you that they've never met you before? And that's where you highlight your skills. So, what are the skills and the skill stories that you can explain in this conversation to back it up to make them want to take that action? And finally, what's the answers that you need? So, this is not just about an employer who gets to make an assessment of something, it's also the candidate who gets to say, do I like this? Do I like what they're telling me? Let me ask them some questions that I can't find the answer to on the internet, like, tell me how you define success, or what does it look like in terms of, where someone has really succeeded in an entry level role. And when you have these conversations that are clear and structured and have an objective, it can be highly, highly effective. And for him, I also told him, you got to go back to some of the people that you started with, people that maybe you started to connect with, or alumni. You need to be persistent and ask for another meeting and use this framework. And he did. And the more he connected, the more he realized one connection led to another. And the role that he ended up with is at Traba, which is a supply chain company highly using data analytics. And it's ideal that he's in a sales role. His ability to communicate, his ability to understand analytics, it's kind of blend the perfect combination of all of the components that he is strong at. So he just started in June. I just spoke to him last week, getting his permission to use his story. But it just gives you a sense when you can get clarity, everything starts to fall into place. I actually say when you figure out your skills, the rest of the job search gets easier because you know where you're going and how to get there. So really, really good story about Poe. And then let me tell you about Edison. Edison came to us. He is right now a rising senior, but he came to us earlier this year. He had had some kind of disparate internships, but very common to a lot of students we talk to, sport management major. I have many, many students who study sport management who want to get into sports. It is really challenging. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is like entertainment. Getting into sports is highly competitive, and a lot of students want to get into this area. So he came to us saying, hey, I've already applied to a lot of sports jobs, not a lot of success. He's like, I tried to network, but honestly, kind of uncomfortable. I don't really like doing it. I don't really know what to say. He said, I even contacted 70 people. Now, again, I don't know what he said in those connections, but nothing came of it. And he had worked, his dad had a construction company. He had done some work for him. He worked for the track team. He kind of was, he was the manager there, but he didn't know how to leverage these experiences. He didn't know how to tell a story or his elevator pitch, just kind of wasn't sure about how to move forward. So for Edison, we also helped him figure out, what are your main core skills for him. He had, especially as the manager of the track team, he was able to do a lot of project management, really kind of get things organized. Also with some classwork that he had looked at, he had the ability to lead. He was really felt he was strong in problem solving. But for him, we really had him targeting in on his networking more. And this is the 10 and 10 rule. So I mentioned this earlier about, I was in the CNBC article last week about the 10 and 10 rule. The 10 and 10 rule is this: to pick 10 companies that are of interest to you and pick 10 people across those companies who are doing the job that you would potentially want to have. But don't pick the vice president or the CEO. I want you to pick someone who graduated in the last 3 to 5 years, who's also a fellow alumni, who's in these entry level roles that you can really learn from. And for Edison, he really targeted, considered sports marketing, apparel, collegiate or professional sports. And he also went back to alumni. He really had to push himself out of the comfort zone. But once he had the tools, he felt like he could start making these conversations. And as a result, he was made a connection with someone else who was a fellow alum, and he was able to get an internship this past summer where he worked with the MLS soccer team of New Mexico United as a front office intern. So kind of combining his analytics, also getting customer exposure. I just spoke with him the other day. He said that they actually just invited him on to stay on part-time for the remainder of his senior year, which is amazing. So just giving you some perspective of when you're able to help gain some clarity and focus and really targeting of what you want to do, but also matching it up with your skills and having a really clear story, that's when we see our students start to have results. So let me pause and if you have questions, I'm going to double check the Q&A. So if you have some questions, I see one question here, but if you have any other questions, please put them in the Q&A and I would be happy to answer them. So the first question is, how do you communicate human characteristics that separate you from AI through your resume? Really good question. It's kind of loaded there. Let's break that down. Let me start with, everybody needs a good, clean resume, but the resume is not what gets you hired. A resume is a tool that you have as part of your toolkit, along with your resume, your LinkedIn, the letters that you write. But what I think is the most compelling is what you're saying when you get into it. Now, yes, obviously you need to have this on your resume before you get into a conversation. What I think, and I'm kind of, teasing a little bit of what employers have told us, is that they want to see that you understand. You don't have to be the engineer. You don't have to be able to code, but you need to be able to understand, how did you use AI in a way that helped you or your class or an organization help them make a decision. So for example, if you start to play around with, I really like Claude, and co-work is where you can build an agent. Doesn't matter what it is, ChatGPT, Grok, Perplexity. It's getting comfortable with these different tools in order to come up with information that can help optimize things. Like, so for example, I had the opportunity to speak with a recruiter at Morgan Stanley, the campus recruiter. And he said to me, I had a really interesting student tell me a story about AI, that he and his friends, they went out and they played golf. And he decided to create an agent that was able to track everyone's golf scores, give live updates on how everyone was doing with their handicap, and then be able to synthesize it and present it at the end. So that's not a class project, but it's kind of being creative of how you're thinking and problem solving and doing something in a more efficient way using the technology. So you can't be afraid to use it. You need to kind of show some ways of either that you've just learned, taken some certifications, whether you've gone through a boot camp. They want to make sure that you're not afraid of it, because it's definitely being used in the workplace to optimize what's going on. So I think that's really important. And I also love metrics on a resume, whether it's about AI or just what you accomplished, always showing what was the result of how you either increased by X% or contributed to X result or X number of clients or widgets. But the more you can use metrics to also show that you're really getting to that impact, I think that's very valuable as well. Okay, but thanks for asking that question. Hey, Talisha, what is a good way to gauge proficient skills? Really good question. So I'll answer it this way. When we talk about skills, I don't necessarily talk about it as proficiency. I talk about it as what's core. So core skills, as I said, and I think there might even be a blog, Priscilla, if you can find one. It's really, and I actually had a video where I kind of draw three circles, but core are the three skills, the three ones that you are the most competent, most skilled at, and you enjoy doing, and you want to utilize going forward. You might be amazing at accounting, but if you don't want to be accountant, that's not core. Okay, but let's say you figure out what that is. But if you think, for an example, so let's say you're a great writer. Well, you can't just say you're a great writer because your friends told you or you think you are. You need an example. So, for example, maybe you wrote for the school newspaper and you wrote three articles a week about the sports team or about student life, and you have an example of how you were able to create compelling content to get more readers or to express, a point that comes across in your writing. That's that you have the skill and you have a story to back it up. So it's not necessarily, you're not like, I mean, you obviously, and you acquire skills as you continue to grow in your life, but it's something that at this point, I want you to reflect on what do you know how to do now and what's an example of how you've done it. And I think that is a good gauge for you figuring out, okay, these are my skills. And by the way, it's very different of writing it down versus verbalizing it. So we always have this process where have everyone write down their skill story, but when they come to our group or private sessions, you have to say it. And saying it is different than reading it. So it's getting comfortable articulating and knowing just your own story. It's everything that you have. It's just learning about yourself and how you want to express that. So I hope that helped, Talisha. Um, Hi, Katie. Really good question. So, how many kids do we see that can't verbalize what they want to do? That is very common. That is very common, especially now when we have so many students who pick a major very early on in school, right? It's like at 17 years old, you're being asked to commit to the major that you want. You don't really know if this is what you want to do. And now you get on this path through school, and sometimes by the time you get to be a junior or senior, you're like, oh, I didn't really love it, but I can't undo it. So it's very common, actually, that especially, and I'll say we have so many young adults who really were impacted by the pandemic and losing that chunk of time in high school or college or middle school. As they get older, it's really impacted them. So for us, the key piece about how you start to figure out what you like, there definitely has to be some self-reflection, self-assessment, whether you studied it or not. And the other key piece is networking. You have to, it can't be done in your head. It can't be like, I think I'd like this, or my best friend likes this, so I'm going to do that too. It's, you have to talk to people who are doing the thing that you're thinking about or considering it. And I know that's very nerve-wracking for a lot of young adults because they're not comfortable. They don't know how to have these conversations. They're afraid to reach out. I understand all of that. There's this lack of confidence and anxiety about it. But we kind of give them the bite-sized pieces of what they need to do to build the confidence to then have the conversation. And it can be taught. It can be taught. But yes, it's definitely a challenge. A lot don't know what to do, or they see the very small few, like, top 10 company names of what everyone else says. But there's hundreds, there's thousands of other places of things to do. We kind of really also teach them how to read. By the way, just because you graduate college doesn't mean the learning ends. You need to read trade journals. You need to be up on the news, especially in an industry that you're thinking about. You need to be, talking to people, following people, listening to podcasts. Like you have to still put time into it. It doesn't just, snap your fingers and it happens. But really good question. It's a challenge, and we give them the tools to help make it happen. Okay. There's a couple good questions here, so I'm just trying to see how to. Okay. Any advice for cover letters and letter of recommendation slash references? So this is something. I'll kind of. These are two separate questions. So probably the first question is, do I need a cover letter? And should I put a cover letter for every application or every resume? My opinion is, I think, you'll hear debate. I think a cover letter can be short and simple and concise, but it also gives you an opportunity to explain why your skills align to that company. And your resume can't do that alone. A resume is only reflecting you. It's not saying, I have these skills and this is why it's a match for helping you solve your problem at your organization and why I'm a fit. And that's what I like about a cover letter. So it doesn't have to be extensive or super long. I like bullets, but I think being able to start it off without saying, I am applying to this job. I like to start it off with, I noticed that your company is a leader in this space, or this is something new in the news, and this is why I'm attracted to applying to this role. I think it gives you a chance to express why you're different versus not doing it. So when in doubt, I'd say do it. I think we have, I don't think I've made it available as a freebie yet, but we do have a really simple template that we use with our clients on how to have a great cover letter. So it doesn't have to be so difficult. And I could probably do an upcoming video on that as well. Let's talk about recommendations and references. So I had recently done a video about this. Um, that says, don't leave school empty-handed. And one of the things about not leaving empty-handed, if you're still in college, is to make sure you are connecting with a professor that you had a connection with or that you did well in their class to see if they'd be willing to be a reference for you. So that's the easiest way. Even if you've had no internship or none that you felt, you can go back to the hiring manager. I love just kind of lining up people that could speak on your behalf. So I really love going back to professors, especially if you don't have one. Obviously, this is also the reason of why you should go to class, why you should do your homework, why you should go to office hours and get to know your professors. Um, and I think that's also very helpful to have in your back pocket for when you do have an internship, asking someone, would you be willing to be a reference for me in the future? I don't love putting that out there when you first send an application or a resume. I think that's something that you hold on to if someone's asking for it, or if you feel you need that to really compete to show, let me show you why someone else can speak to my abilities over someone else. So I hope that kind of answers, those are kind of my two answers on cover letter and then recommendations, references, but I think they're both good to have. Um, I have a lot of good questions. Okay. So couple things here. Okay, so some of the questions in the Q&A are a little bit more custom to your individual piece. So I could always email with you after, or you can send me an email to info@nextgradestep.com. Let me kind of touch on one more that I kind of hit on before. So Adam asked me a good question, which I kind of talked about, is what's the best advice for someone who's trying to enter a challenging industry, such as entertainment, like I mentioned? So, sometimes I have to ask, why? Why sports? Why entertainment? Because what I need students to remember is that it's still a business. There is money to be made. There is a client that needs to be served. There is an HR function, an operations function, probably an IT function, a sales function. These businesses seem very glamorous because, we know about Netflix or the NBA or MLB, but I'm telling you, and we've had students who have gotten employment there, but I think the key piece to remember is that you don't go into it saying, "Oh, I am such a big basketball fan. That's why I want to work for the NBA." Like if they had a nickel for every person that says that, or I'm a big Knicks fan, right? Like of course it's about I have these skills. Like I understand data analytics and I can help you better analyze your stats to help you with this problem. And I think it's sometimes the cachet of, oh, this is such the name. And I'm more interested about students and grads building their skills and their skill set versus the name of the company, quite honestly. And yes, if you eventually want to get into those areas, then you got to talk to a lot of people. You have to do a lot of networking. And yes, even with, I'll just say sports, you better start on your college sports team. That should be like a no-brainer. You should be working on your team. Even entertainment, even if there's small production companies, even if there's, start small. It doesn't have to be big, minor league or small, TV stations, radio stations. Doesn't have to be the marquee names. To me, it's the marquee names start to see you as an appealing candidate when you show that you've done that work for smaller companies, but you're also doing a very specific role. I'm doing video editing. I'm doing, commentating. I'm writing copy. That's journalism. So I think sometimes we get lost in the big names of these companies of how it's being so glamorous, but I think at the end of the day, they're just another company who needs to make money and needs somebody to fit a role to solve their problem. So that's kind of my 2 cents on sports and entertainment. Um, Let me do Let me just see. I just saw someone else put something in there. I'll do one more question and then I want to come back to some content that I think you'll really find valuable. Really good question. How do you communicate those human characteristics that separate you from AI through your resume? So to me, it goes back to combination of showing your ability to even your ability to talk, communicate, take risks, to show metrics of how you impacted somebody or something because of your skill set. And I think the other key piece is it's not just through your resume. You have to be proactive. You have to reach out. You have to cold message some people on LinkedIn. It's not going to always come to you or hide behind your resume or hide behind the application of, oh, I'll just, keep going. You have to kind of make it very clear about what your skills are. And Daniel, I see your one skill. What if you don't have any skills? Okay, that's not true. Everybody has a gift. Everybody has a talent. Maybe it's not at the most coming to your forefront, but everybody has someone to offer. So I just want to make sure that don't ever think that you don't have something to offer. You do. All right. So let me come back. These are amazing questions, and I will leave more time at the end, but I really want to get to a couple of tips that I think will be really valuable for both parents and students who are watching this and saying, well, what do I do now? How do I make this work? All right, hold on. Let me get myself back here. Okay. So I want to tell you, I had a really fascinating opportunity to speak with three heads of campus recruiting. I spoke to the head of campus recruiting for Morgan Stanley, the head of campus recruiting for New York Life, and for Wells Fargo. And this is kind of a synthesis of my conversations with them. And they were really honest and really upfront. And I feel like there's a lot of positivity about what they said that should make candidates and your fan and parents feel better about it. So the number one of the top thing that they couldn't get over is that if you have a student or grad who gets through the resume screening, the initial interview screening, and multiple people to get you in front of a live person, they cannot believe the lack of preparation for getting in front of somebody when you finally made it through. And they feel that some of the most basic things are not understood of what do we do? Even why do you want to be here? A lot of students cannot express why do you want this job? And why is this job aligned with what your skills are? Or tell me more about what you know about our company. Just with AI and Google at your fingertips, it's a no-brainer. And you can ask simple as like, give me the top 3 points that I should know about this company before I walk into the interview. You have to know it, and they're just frustrated that not enough candidates prepare. The other thing they see is that, like I said, they want to be wanted. You don't always actually have to be the top GPA or the number one in your class or the one who is also on paper the most qualified. They want people who also want to be at that company. And how do you show that? You've gone to the career fair and you always stop at that booth every time. You have reached out to people at the organization where you talk about how you want to be there because of X, Y, and Z or the moves that they're making. They want to see that you want it. And when they feel like you're a little like, I don't know, or I don't know why I'd want to take this job, or a little aloof, or they're not sure what it is, it's very frustrating to them. I think also we talk about soft skills over technical. So yes, in certain cases, obviously, like if you're going the investment banking route, you need to have that. But the interesting thing about even investment banking, they're hiring a lot of English majors. Why? Because they know how to write, they know how to communicate well, and these are some of the soft skills. They're like, I can teach somebody discounted cash flow. I can teach someone how to manipulate the numbers. I can't teach someone how to take feedback or communicate well in a group or to advocate or to take on leadership. So very often they want those soft skills. It's not just the pure rote whatever I took from coding or engineers. They want to see that you have those soft skills as well. They want to see that you take initiative. They want to see that you have grit. that you failed, that you get back up again, that you're resilient, that not everything always comes easy, and that you're willing to keep going when it gets tough. This one I thought was really helpful because I know there's so much pressure around internships, but they're like, yeah, internships are helpful. They understand that not every kid can get an internship. They know that it's 50% of that 8 million kids wanted one and not everyone gets one. But that's okay. Long as you're showing other ways. You could be like, I'm doing my own project, or I created my own portfolio, or I'm writing my own blogs, or I'm investing in my own stocks. They just want to see that you're taking initiative, whether it's on campus or by yourself, to make it happen. Um, AI, and this is kind of what I said earlier. They want to know more, that not that you just use it to help you write your paper or not, by the way, it's getting harder to cheat in college anyway because all the professors have the tools to see when you do that. But they want to understand, have you spent time with different platforms trying to figure it out, or creating a project for yourself, or trying to see, yeah, I worked on Perplexity, or I created an agent and it did this for me. And no, I might be a digital marketing background, but here's how I'm trying to learn and engage with AI. They don't expect you to be the star. They wanted to see that you're open and you're willing to learn because it's absolutely becoming part of their workflow. And then just some basics, being professional, showing up on time, dressing appropriately, looking them in the eye, shaking their hand, sending a thank you note. Some of the good old fashioned things that, yes, as a parent, these were still good 20 years ago. They're still good now. Basic professionalism is still important. And sometimes I think sometimes as students, they're not taught. You're not taught. So I understand. Don't underestimate the power of some just good manners, and start earlier. Here's the thing. It's not just, yes, investment banking and consulting potentially are recruiting like 18 months ahead of time and start sophomore year. That's happening. That's not every company. But if you are a junior and you want an internship for the next summer, or if you're a senior and you want a job, starting earlier is better, even with the networking and reaching out to people and finding alumni or people in the companies that you want. It takes time. Like I said back in the earlier slide, it could take 6 months, a good 6 months. So just start earlier, and they kind of want you to start earlier too, because the kids who come to them in May looking for those jobs, sometimes the spots are filled. So I hope that was I just thought that was really insightful from what they said. But I want to give you some tips of like, so what do you do, right? You're a parent and maybe you've made some mistakes. By the way, I've made almost all these mistakes as well. I do not claim to be the expert, although I have seen a lot and we've done a lot. But here's some things I just have seen as a parent of maybe if we could readjust a little bit, and I'll give you some tips of how you can actually help your student or grad to be successful in the process. So one of the parent mistakes that I see is just kind of this over reliance that everything on campus will take care of it, right? Either the career fair or career services or Handshake or whatever online job boards. It is absolutely a resource and every student should use it. I think you just can't assume one that your kid is going, because we just said 4 in 10, only 4 in 10 go. But don't it's not the only resource they need. They really need to work at getting an internship or get a job. I want to talk about introductions. I love introductions. I love referrals. However, I've had so many parents come back to me and say, I don't get it. I introduced my son or daughter to the vice president at my company or my friend who's an executive and nothing happened. And the reason why nothing happened is probably it was too early. Your kid was not prepared. They were too casual. They did not take it seriously. And when it comes to money and hiring and reputation, no one's going to put their reputation on the line for someone that they don't think is really ready. I love introductions, but there's an opportunity to practice and rehearse with them to make sure that they are ready before you make those. The other thing we see is, I think you just asked that before, like I have so many kids who don't know what they want to do. Maybe I should just tell my kid what they should go do. We should just do that. And I get it. Like I'm one of those moms, like, let me tell you what you should do. But here's what I found is that when we start telling our kids what to go do, or go do what I did, or you should be a lawyer like I'm a lawyer, or whatever, if it's not speaking to their skill set, they're going to go down the path and they're not going to be happy and they're going to end up switching anyway. I'm going to tell you on the next slide what you do to help them figure out instead of telling them what to do. But be very careful about dictating, like, go do this, because that doesn't speak to what they really are good at. It could really go sideways. I want to talk about timing. We know as parents that there's a time frame for interviews and recruiting and hiring. And very often we're like, you better get started, you better go, you better do this, you better do that. But if the timing is not our kids' timing, we have to understand that too, right? The priority is that our kids have to finish school. School is the priority. They have to finish their degree. So if we say to them in their second semester of senior year, and maybe they held a sport and they have, 18 credits, and be like, you better start applying. And they're like, I can't do this right now. We have to realize that our timeline is not always their timeline. Or we have to also, if they're just not motivated or they want to try it on their own, I know this is a really hard one, but if they don't want it or they are not ready, and obviously there's all kinds of things we can talk to about if they're not ready, and whether there's any mental health things going on. But just to be aware of it, I know I'll just speak for myself. I can be like, it's time to do this. And if my kids are like, back off, mom, it's not my time. But it will come together. Same thing, this whole concept of, how much you're helping versus hindering. You want to proof the resume? Awesome. You want to do a role play with them to practice their interviewing skills? Amazing. You want to say, hey, I have somebody that I can connect you with and just make like an email introduction? Awesome. You should not be you should not be showing up to interviews with them. I know that sounds crazy, but there's been articles about parents showing up to interviews with students. You should not be writing letters on their behalf. You should not be whispering to them in the back of a Zoom interview of what to say. Like, I understand there's a point too. And by the way, our kids need to fail. And that's a tough one because that's what also builds resilience. That's also what builds a skill set and how they learn. And sometimes we need to watch them struggle in order for them to then be able to recorrect. So just to be careful of that. And the last piece is that we assume that they really know how to navigate the search, and honestly, they really don't understand it. It's just not taught at school. And I think again, between time missed out from the pandemic and all these other things, I think they really don't understand. So just to be aware of that. So here's what you can do. Instead of saying, did you apply to a job today? I would encourage you to say, the job search seems really challenging. What do you think is your biggest challenge? What part of it is most difficult for you? And when you start to let them talk and tell you, it could be, I just really freeze up when I have to send a cover letter, or I am just so afraid my resume isn't right, or I don't even know how to introduce myself. It'll start to uncover the things that are challenging. And you will also be able to be more helpful to them because you know what it is, as opposed to just being like, did you do this and did you do that? The other piece that I spent a lot of time on today is trying to help them understand their skills. As we had a couple students on here saying, is I don't know what my skills are. I don't think I have any. And as a parent, I think it's a really nice opportunity to say, I noticed that when you did this role or you did this club or you did this, I noticed that you had leadership skills, or I noticed your ability to be, you have amazing research skills. So sometimes just helping them figure it out is a great way that you can support them. Let's talk about time in terms of structuring their time. So I know a lot of parents are like, I don't know what they're doing in their room. They probably should be spending more time looking for a job. I want to just be clear. No one should look for a job 8 hours every day. It is not healthy. It's not good for mental health. It is good to have a part-time job. So like I'm speaking to like if you just graduated or it's a summer, it's good to have a part-time job. It's good to have time to go to the gym. Good to have time to go meet your friends and then to block out 2 to 3 or 4 hours 2 to 3 hours a day of like, this is your concentrated time. But I just sometimes, there's an expectation it should be done all day. It's not healthy for anyone, whether you're young or older. And also not asking them, how many applications did you submit this week? A better question to ask is, tell me how many people you spoke with this week. How many networking conversations did you have? Live conversations over the phone, over video, in person. Because that is a better measure of moving the needle versus the number of applications, because that really is like a black hole. I talked about making introductions at the right time. So once you've done some role playing, once you've rehearsed with them, then make the introductions to your friends. Um, I think one of the most important pieces to help remind our kids is to remind them that people hire people, not AI, not a tracking system, not an automated system, not a place that, not LinkedIn, not anything, handshake, all these things. People hire people. And that is still true today. And that is how people get hired, not because the resume was perfect or the GPA was higher than anyone else's. If you can't have the conversation and you can't articulate your value and you can't make those connections, it's going to be a lot harder to hide behind the technology. And I know a lot of our kids want to do that because this is fearful. This is something they've never done before. And this is the first time in their life where everything's been prescripted for them for 16 years and there's no roadmap. I mean, we have a roadmap, but in general, there's no roadmap for this. So it's overwhelming, but remind them that people hire people and they need to persevere. One email, one call, one follow-up is not going to be enough. And one of the phrase that they quoted me in CNBC last week, one of my favorite phrases, when you followed up after the conversation, you sent another follow-up, maybe adding some value, you have not heard back, maybe the third email, the first line of the email says, please pardon my persistence. It shows you're professional. It shows you're not going anywhere. And I'm telling you, I get responses like kids, all of our clients, they get responses because people are like, oh, I forgot. It was buried in my inbox. It's really powerful to show that you're not going anywhere and that you're not afraid to advocate for yourself. Okay. So those are some of my tips there. And if you're a student hanging on, and I think this is just good for young adults to understand too, or if you're a parent, you can share this with them also. Be really careful that assuming that the name of your school or your GPA alone is enough. And as you can see from the examples, I had someone who was in an Ivy League school who was still struggling. I'm not saying it's not helpful. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do well in school. You should do as well as you can and optimize everything you can, but be careful that that's not the only thing that's going to get you hired. The other thing is, if you only focus on job boards and you think it's a number game and you think more is better, it's going to be a long time before you hear back. It is not a numbers game, and more is not better. It's quality over quantity. And honestly, I want you to measure the number of people and conversations that you have and less about the amount of applications that you have. The other thing I see with students, there's this like delay tactic, and I get it. Like, oh, I don't need to go to the career fair. I'll do that when I'm a junior and when I'm a senior or when I graduate, or I'll deal with it. And I understand there's a lot of fear and overwhelm. But if you do a little bit each year, and I know Priscilla is going to link the college to career roadmap, if you do a little bit starting from freshman year through each year, by the time you get to be a senior, it's not so overwhelming. And I have that resource of what the little steps you can take. Just do it sooner. I know a lot of students are afraid to ask for help or afraid to show that it looks like you don't know. It's okay. You should ask for help. Do not be afraid. This was not taught to you. Most do not know how to do it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think the same goes for the way parents make the introductions. I think a lot of students sometimes assume that, like, oh, I have an uncle who works here or a cousin who works there. It's just you can't always assume that the family connections will absolutely lead you to a job. It just sometimes doesn't happen the way you think. And as I've said before, don't leave campus empty-handed. Use the campus resources, every single one that's available to you, because it's not the same when you graduate. So a lot of time you skip out or you're like, I don't need that. I don't need to go to the event. I don't need to go to career services. I heard they're not so great. I'd encourage you to go anyway. And the tips of what you should be doing again, skills can be more powerful than their GPA. I mean, I'm going to say it again and again. People hire people. The more you can show your human skills than working with AI. The key piece to differentiating yourself is being able to articulate your skills and showing how your skills line up to helping that company solve a problem. It's not saying I'm great at all these things. I'm great at all these things, and I'm solely focused on helping you accomplish this by putting myself in your shoes. And that's what makes you stand out. That's what gets candidates hired. And you have a lot to offer, but you need to persevere. And you need to keep following up, and you need to keep checking your email, by the way. I know you don't, but you got to keep checking your email. Yes, this webinar is recorded. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I will kind of just finish out. If you're a student or a grad, here's a quick assignment. If you want to do it, find your top skills, pick your 10 companies or people, send it to me, send it to info@nextgreatstep.com. I would love to review it. I think there's some things that you can start doing right now. Everyone who's in here, this will all be recorded. You'll have access to the recording. It works. We've had clients land at all kinds of companies, every industry, every type of role. I'm really, really proud of the work that we've done to help our young adults. We are not recruiters, we are not headhunters. I don't place them in the jobs. We teach them how to be successful in landing the first job and the second and beyond. If you are interested in learning more about how we do coaching, we do both private and group coaching. We're running our next groups actually starting on August 4th and August 5th. We have an evening and a daytime, but you can scan the QR code. Happy to have a complimentary discovery call to see if we are the right fit to help you. And if you want to hear about a lot of the tools, it's on Amazon, the Next Great Step book. So if you want to just kind of get familiar with our approach, you're welcome to access the book on Amazon as well. And a lot of the same free resources that Priscilla has been sharing all night. Kind of take my face out of there. Everything, resume, LinkedIn. How do you get ready for interviews? How do you prepare for the career fair? How do you track your internship progress? I mean, tons and tons of free resources for parents and for students. Highly recommend that you engage with that as well. And we're here to help. So if you have questions, I'm on every social, but you can email me directly, info@nextgreatstep.com. I'll take a look now. If you want to hang on for a few more minutes, I'll keep going just because I know I have a lot of people here. But let me take a look at the questions and see if there was some new ones so I can get your answers to you. Okay, can I speak to a couple questions? Oh, wow, good question. I'm going to stop the sharing of the screen here so you can see my whole picture here. Should I lie in behavioral interviews? And what if you don't have many impactful problem solving experiences, if that makes sense? Never lie. Never lie. Now, I'm going to tell you there's times where you should never tell the whole truth. Like if someone says, "What's your greatest weakness?" Don't give your absolute worst weakness. But everything comes around. I don't lie. If you don't feel that you have the skills to match that job, and on general, you should have at least 60 to 60%. Because remember, when employers put together a job ad, it's a wish list. They're never going to get every single thing accommodated for. They want to get as many as they possibly can. And my goal is if you see at least 60% that you can match up to, you should apply. But you should also reach out to the hiring manager ahead of time. You should reach out to the recruiter. This should not be done in isolation. But you should not lie because you know what? They're going to figure it out. They're going to start asking you more questions and you're going to dig yourself such a hole that you're going to forget your lie and it's going to be much, much worse because you're going to be banned from applying to that company. You do not want to have a reputation of someone who lies or made something up or have them tell a referral or a colleague. Like, I'd rather you not go for that role than lie. It's just uh, karma is, it comes back to you. That's all I can tell you. I've been doing this a while. It comes back. Do not lie in an interview. And if you feel it gets really over your head, then it's not the right role for you. Do these tips apply to American companies only, or do you think they would be useful worldwide? Really good question. We have worked with students in different countries, not enormous, and I know there's some very specific cultural norms as well. So I'm not going to say, the way you present or your assertiveness, but for the most part, I think they kind of apply in terms of people hire people, being persistent, how you solve a problem. I've worked internationally in my previous roles. I was a consultant with executives, and I've worked in many different countries. And I will tell you that a lot of these same techniques apply. So I do think it's relevant. Um, Question about AI certifications. It's a really good question. It's something that we are actually working on right now about vetting what are the AI certifications that students should have. There's some good ones out there. Again, they all serve different roles. One might be, these are the basics, right? This is like how you use AI. That might be too simplistic. Or what's a large language model? Others are, here's how you build a project with AI to show that you're proficient in building this kind of project. So I think you have to do some research. I would, kind of ask all the different AIs, ask Google and Claude and Copilot and Grok, and ask a bunch of different AIs of, based on what you're looking for or the age where you're at and what could be recommended. I do think there's a few that do tend to come up quite a bit. There's an IBM one, there's one from Claude. It's funny, we are in the process of vetting this right now. So, hang on. Hopefully, in the next few months, we'll have it better answer. The goal is that I have to take all these certifications to see if they're worth it. So we got to get through that. But I do think it's helpful if you're not familiar with it. I think it's really very, very helpful thing. So I really, really appreciate everyone joining. And like I said, if I was not able to get to your questions, again, feel free to message me at info@nextgreatstep.com, or I'll try to do the video in coming day. I will also share the video as well. But I'm so grateful for all of you attending. I appreciate the engagement. We are here to help. And any questions or anything you want to learn more about, please go to nextgreatstep.com. Have a great evening.